Good afternoon, and welcome to another edition of Doctor2Doctor in the Chatroom, where we discuss relevant topics that impact our communities and our world. I'm so excited that you guys have joined me for another Saturday and to just hang out with me for this hour. As I always say, if you didn't come back, then I could not do this. So thank you so much. I hope that you guys are staying well. I hope that you're taking very good care of yourselves. So many things going on around us, so many things that we are susceptible to, the flu, colds, and all these different viruses. So take really good care of yourselves, okay, guys? Again, thank you for hanging out. Welcome to our topic today on real allies standing in solidarity. We're going to have a very honest and thought provoking conversation about what it truly means to be an ally for people of color. Allyship isn't just about good intentions, it's about action, accountability, and commitment to justice. In today's world, being an ally means more than just words. It's about standing up, it's about speaking out, and using platforms to create meaningful change. But what does real allyship look like in everyday life? How can we move beyond performative gestures and build genuine relationships rooted in trust, respect, and understanding? I want you to just hang around for a great discussion. We're going to take a deep dive into the challenges, responsibilities, and impact of allyship. We're going to hear from a person that is an active ally for people of color and talk about how to work to break down barriers and build a more inclusive society, and most importantly, get active in making a difference. I'm so excited to have this discussion, and I'm very excited about our guest today. Kim Palermo is a dedicated anti racism educator, consultant, and content creator with decades of experience helping people understand systemic racism, equity, and inclusion. She has a background in applied behavioral sciences and special education, and she specializes in breaking down complex social issues into accessible, actionable insights for those who are very new learners to anti racism. Kim provides educational programs, training, and community building initiatives focused on the responsibility white folks have in dismantling systemic racism. Her approach blends historical analysis, social science, and real world application to meet people where they are and foster meaningful change. Kim has worked with hundreds of thousands of people through live discussions, online communities, and educational media, emphasizing the importance of listening, self reflection, and proactive action. Her latest initiative, a talk show on anti racism that focuses on reluctant white women's responsibility, creates a welcoming space for the newest learners to engage in honest conversations, ask questions, and build the confidence to take action in their own lives. And we here at Doctor2Doctor in the chat room are so excited to have her with us today. Please welcome to the chat room, Kim Palermo. It is so great to have you today, Kim. Thank you for taking a moment out of your schedule to come and have such an important conversation. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you very much. I'm honored to be here.
Yeah. So I titled this segment Real Allies Standing in Solidarity. And I did that because I followed some of your work and your conversations on social media. And I get the feeling and I can tell that you are a real ally, you are a real advocate for all people. And I appreciate that so much. And it's very important in this climate that we're in today.
Thank you so much. That means the world to me. It really does, because
Yeah.
that means you get me. You know who
Yeah.
I am.
So
You.
I just want to start with, what does it mean to you in terms of being an ally for people of color? What does that mean to you personally?
Well, it's a great question, and my answer might seem a little strange because I have a little disclaimer to say before it. And I don't
Okay.
use the term ally to describe myself because I don't believe it's my place. And let me explain. This sounds really strange.
Right.
Allyship is a label that I should be claiming. It's something that this is gonna sound strange, but it's something that Black people and other people of color determine based on my actions, not really what I think. And so
Yeah.
that being said, I hope that makes sense. That being said, the most important thing to me is that I support the dismantling of systemic racism based on how Black, Brown, Indigenous people, African American people want the support. Um, the work can't be about me, but it ultimately benefits me because
Hmm.
nobody benefits from the system of horrendous systemic racism. So
Yeah.
it can't be like a savior thing or a getting attention thing. It has to come from the heart. And disingenuous performative stuff just doesn't have a place
Hmm.
in this. It, for me, it's not about being an ally. It's about being a human. If I could ignore what's going on, I mean, I consider systemic racism to be an ongoing crime against humanity. And so for me, ignoring it would not be acting human. I know that sounds harsh, but that's kind of my personal. It's very personal to me.
Hmm.
So
That
kind
makes
of
so much
responds to.
sense. And you're exactly right. I followed some of your work and I considered you an ally. It's not how you see yourself, it's how
Right, right,
marginalized people see you.
right. Because it's not about intentions. I mean, and that's a really important part. And that's mainly who I work with. Are
Yeah.
people who are really just starting to think. White folks who are like, "What is going on here?" They want to know, and it's a lifelong journey. So.
Hmm. Can you share an experience or a moment or whatever in your life that made you realize how important it is to be an advocate for these particular demographics of people?
Absolutely. And it comes from my thanks for asking. It comes from my childhood. And surprisingly, when I was a really little girl, like 7, 8, 9, my dad told me about it's kind of like a poem or a saying done by Martin Niemöller, who was this German theologian. A lot of people know his work because he was a German theologian and a pastor. And he lived in Germany, and he was kind of pro-Nazi, and he just didn't understand. And as things went on, he realized how wrong he was, and he became, a staunch, wonderful protester against it. And he was in prison, and he used to say afterwards, a special, I guess it's like a saying to his class because he was a professor, and it's called "First They Came." Are you familiar? I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with that, but if I can read it for people who aren't, would that be okay?
Sure.
And because this is what got me to go, whoa! This was like my whoa moment, and
Yeah.
he says it in a million different ways, but he says first they came for the communists, and I didn't speak out because I wasn't a communist. Then they came for the socialists, and I didn't speak out because I wasn't a socialist. For the trade unionists, and I didn't speak out because it just on and on, and then they came for the Jews, and I wasn't a Jew, but then they came for me, and there was no one to speak out for me. And my dad, little girl, and I was like, whoa. So that was like my definite moment of just kind of what's going on here, and it was a lot because I was kind of young, but I slowly started to catch on. I was a slow learner. Like it took
Hmm.
a while, but
Hmm.
that's my first memory thinking, what's going on here?
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I've actually somebody shared that poem with me just weeks ago, right? And I was like, oh,
Wow.
wow. It was just weeks ago. So I just recently heard that poem and it's very powerful. Yeah.
Wow. That's amazing. Yeah. 'Cause I got lucky enough to hear it from when I was a little kid, and it just kind of hit me.
Yeah. So how has your understanding of race and privilege, evolved over time? What you understand about race, what you understand about, white privilege, how has that evolved over time?
It's definitely evolved. It's a very long, full-time learning process. When I'll just be really blunt, when I first started to try to understand systemic racism, I just kept having these moments over and over again where I thought, I get this. I get it. I know what's going on now. And
Mm-hmm.
I didn't.
Yeah.
I didn't. I thought, oh, now I get it. Now I get it. And then something else would come up and I'd be like, I don't get it at all. I don't get this. And let me explain. Like when I first started studying multiculturalism in my undergrad and learning about it,
Mm-hmm.
I thought, oh, I get this now. I really get this. But learning about it and living it might as well be just different worlds because they are. And
Mm-hmm.
it's such a process for me because I think, okay, now I kind of get this. And then when I taught elementary school in Compton, California during the LA civil unrest after the Rodney King verdicts, I was like, now I really get this,
Okay.
but I didn't. I didn't. And then I became an influencer and I would engage in conversations and I started specializing in working with the very most resistant people to understanding.
Mm-hmm.
And I still thought I got it. So it's been a process of realizing that the truth for white folks, at least, is that we're never going to fully get it. We are going to work up the anti-racism continuum our entire lives and do the best we can and take action that's meaningful and supportive, but we're never going to get there. So I was a slow learner and I kind of realized it it's a commitment to a lifestyle, not like a hobby or something. So
Yeah.
I don't know if that makes
Yeah. It is a
sense.
lifestyle.
So that's
So
yeah,
what
it,
has it been like when you have some of those conversations with the most resistant people? What is that like?
it's definitely it's definitely more of an art than a science
Mhm.
because the defensiveness, the level of defensiveness is incredible. And
Mhm.
so and I expect it by now with most people and I'm happily surprised when it's not, but for the most part, it is extreme defensiveness. We white folks make it about us. It's all
Mhm.
about us
Mhm.
because unfortunately we're kind of used to having everything. Our culture of white supremacy has made it like we think we're just the norm and everyone else is an other. So it's really hard to get the mindset. Um, and what I found, Dr. Shaw, is that a lot of people get so defensive that they're not ready to learn. They can't handle it. It's
Mhm.
it's setting for them to look, understandably, they're looking basically they've been lied to their whole life. They've been living in a culture in a bubble and they they haven't seen outside it and they don't realize that the real history they learned in school was whitewashed and
Mhm.
made to be very lovely and pretty and sanitized. And
Mhm.
so, again, the answer to the question is to get to the person so that I can, and this is for my work. This is work. I would never expect anyone who's living this to have to go through all this. But the fact is, it's it's something I think is our responsibility. And so the defensiveness is the hardest part because if you
Mhm.
tell people who don't get this and don't want to get this,
Mhm.
um, if you don't stop their defensiveness first, they're not going to listen to a word you say. So it is a very,
Right.
very difficult. It's almost like It's like they're indoctrinated. We are indoctrinated.
Well, yeah. So, but is
So
it so? Do you end up having to? Is it more like a layered thing? Like you're pulling back the layers, and you just keep peeling and peeling until you get there. And I guess then with that said, sometimes you don't get there, no matter how many layers you peel back. But
Ex-
I would think that
yeah.
people that are willing to have the discussions are more prone to getting there. Because
Yeah,
I think
absolutely. What you're saying is
the people that aren't
right.
in support, right, just probably won't even have the conversation.
Right. It's you kind of have. It's like my husband says. This is only. He says, Kim, only you picked an area that you are passionate about, where the the white folks think you're a race traitor and don't want to hear a word you say. And
Yeah.
understandably, Black, brown, and indigenous people and other people of color can't trust me because they've learned, you know. And so he's like, only you picked that kind of, but that's my, what you said was absolutely true. And so what I do is this, and this might sound really strange, but I pick the lowest, most broad level, such as human constructs. Most of us don't really get what a human construct is. And
Mm-hmm.
so starting with that kind of low level for maybe somebody who's so educated like you, that's like, are you kidding me? But honestly, white folks don't understand that. And we also don't understand, and this is in general, of course, based on my experience working with thousands of white people, we don't understand race as a system.
Mm-hmm.
We think it's personal, like, oh, well, I like Black people, so what are you talking about? And being thought of as racist for us is worse than the F word. I mean, it's like worse than being called, that is like, we'll do anything. So it's very psychological and sociological, as I obviously but
Mm-hmm.
that's kind
Yeah.
of,
Yeah, I get that. Yeah.
so
So, Kim, what are some common misconceptions people have about being an advocate or allyship? What are you learning to be some of those misconceptions?
yeah, some of the misconceptions about allyship have, there's a bunch of them. I think for me, I found that a lot of people think, and I get why we think this. We think that having the right intentions
Mm-hmm.
is all that matters. It's like
Mm-hmm.
love is enough, or stuff like that. And we're is that's a great start. It's not. This is
Mm-hmm.
more complicated than that, more complex, and it's more of a commitment. It's a life commitment. It's not just being nice to everybody, and it is not.
I see.
Unfortunately,
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm.
systemic racism is bigger than any one of us, and whereas being nice to everybody is a lovely tenet, it's not going to dismantle systemic racism. Um, for me, allyship, it can't be about us. It can't be about me. It
Mm-hmm.
it just can't. It's not about being a good white person and like being on the good list.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody's going to see ally as one of the good guys by talking about it. It's about actions, and everyone will see your actions over time and think what they want. But true allyship, we have to set aside our ego. And
Mm.
it's kind of, it's like introspection on steroids. You have to be willing to look at yourself and go, oh, wow. And you got to be able to handle it. Um, and you have to be able to follow, not be like, I'm in charge, I'm the leader, because we're used to
Mm-hmm.
being, in general,
Mm-hmm.
we're used to like trying to run the show and get all the recognition. And it can't be like that. So there's just, oh, I could just talk forever about this one, and I won't. I don't want to like bore you, but
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot. That's a loaded question. Um,
So, and then it kind
it's,
of taps into the question I was going to ask about what does authentic allyship look like, in practice and beyond just the words, right? And you kind of hit on that, and it just I'm always amazed at in 2025 to still have these conversations, like
me too. Me too.
I'm just so amazed with that, like. I even wonder, I mean, we know that there are people in interracial relationships. There are people, such as yourself that have adopted children of other races or whatever. And still, I think
Oh,
there's this lack of understanding about some things for some people, right? Even though, it's like, will we ever really just get there? You know, I
It's
don't
a
know. I don't
toughie, yeah.
understand it. Yeah.
Well, we have our federal government working obviously in absolute opposition to it, and a lot of
Mm,
state and city and all town. I mean,
mm-hmm,
so it's and it's in their best interest to fight us on and have us not understand. But
mm-hmm,
for me, authentic ally is it has nothing to do with what we say. I
mm-hmm,
mean, it does, but it doesn't. What I mean by that is it's what we do consistently over time when
mm-hmm.
no one's watching. And that's like
Wow.
personal integrity stuff. And
Mm-hmm,
so that is what it is about. You can't fake this. You can't perform this. Um,
mm-hmm,
Obviously, one of the most important things I've realized from working with so many white folks who are, very resistant to
mm-hmm,
this, very resistant is a nice way to put it,
mm-hmm.
is they, what was I going to say? They think they're fine. They think
Mm-hmm.
they're perfectly fine. Think they know the facts and they think they know what's going on. It's almost like the Dunning-Kruger effect, where like they know so little that they aren't a good judge of what they know, and so
Mm-hmm.
it's very complicated. Um, oh gosh, when you think about challenging people in your own circles and having conversation with family and
Yeah.
what it means to you and done to you, um, it's about being as authentic as possible. But the biggest thing I learned is you have to give people who are just learning time to digest,
Yes.
because that's like I will not do a seminar that's a crash course for
Mm-hmm,
low level who
mm-hmm,
don't know any black people and they're to talk to, and they're just they don't have a single close friend that's very 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 close and intimate with them who doesn't look just like them.
mm-hmm.
They're free, and I can't just throw all this at them
Yeah.
or they'll run away. And the analogy I use, and I don't want to blab on and on, is
Mm-hmm,
basically, let's say you're living on the planet and someone walks up to you and says, "Oh my gosh, I just saw someone from another planet,"
mm-hmm.
and you're like in shock because you didn't know there were other planets,
Yeah.
and you're like, "What?" So that's
Yeah.
the kind of shock the white folks run away because they're like,
Mm-hmm,
they think you're crazy. And
mm-hmm,
so you have it's touchy, and I'm not all for being like fragility and being fragile with
mm-hmm.
people, but I've gone full circle. I've gone full
Yeah.
circle. You, I got to meet people where they're at and put in the work,
Right.
because it
Right.
is
I
responsibility
want to talk
of yeah.
about how, so when you talk about, when you say that, then I want to know how would someone that's practicing advocacy or allyship, you know, make it meaningful? Let's talk about that when we come back from break. We're actually way over break. We'll be back in a moment on Doctor in the chat room on WOJG.com, 94.7 FM. We'll see you in a moment. And we are still here on Doctor in the chat room. We are talking about allyship, and we're talking about standing in solidarity, people that are advocating for people of color. So you talked about it being a lifestyle, right? And you talked about it not being about you. So, how can allies avoid that performative activism and just ensure that the support they're offering is definitely meaningful?
It's really important, and it has to be done constantly.
Mm-hmm,
Um, it's it has to be done constantly. Constant
mm-hmm,
introspection, a willingness to take criticism and evaluation, even when it hurts our feelings.
mm-hmm,
And it will. We will make
mm-hmm,
mistakes.
mm-hmm,
Have to be able to come to a place where we humble ourselves, and I say drop your ego at the door, because you're going to mess up
mm-hmm,
and you're going to feel horrible about it. You're going to feel like, oh my God, somebody thinks I'm racist. Oh my gosh. You're going to panic and you're going to feel like an idiot, and you're going to be like, want to run away because it
mm-hmm,
doesn't feel good.
mm-hmm,
And you feel awful, like I'm a horrible person or whatever you feel. And you have to not run away. You have to
mm-hmm,
say, you know what? I messed up and I'm going to learn from it. And I'm going to grow and I'll never do it again.
Mm-hmm.
And it's basically like going to therapy almost, because we have to understand we're indoctrinated. Everybody
Mm-hmm.
is
Mm-hmm.
indoctrinated into our in my opinion, a culture of white supremacy, and it impacts us
Mm-hmm.
all differently. And so to, deprogram ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
it takes work, and it's painful, and we have
Yeah.
to
So I was
just.
going to ask, what challenges have you faced on your journey? And you've covered some of those. And if you'd like to share more, that is totally fine in this space. But I certainly want to know, in facing those challenges, what made you stay with it? Like, I can only
That's a great question.
imagine
Yep.
some of the things you've gone through, but you've obviously said, no matter what, I'm going back. It's like, the
Mhm.
bear is in there, but you're going back in anyway.
Absolutely, and that's and it's like, for me, the challenges have been, there's I've talked a bit about them, but for me, most of the challenges have been having to start all over every time
Mm,
I meet somebody who's
yeah.
uh, start all over every time. I am not to be
Mhm,
trusted by. I mean, the way I look, my says I look like a Karen, So I'm
mhm,
like, really?
mhm,
Yeah. So I mean, I look like the stereotypical person who historically has done horrendous damage, um,
mhm,
and been the catalyst for some of the worst atrocities to Black, Brown, Indigenous people, and African Americans in the history of our country. So
mhm,
I have to start all over with every single person I meet, knowing that they may never fully connect or get with me, and that's the way it goes. And that's the way it goes. And then
yeah.
with white folks, um, oftentimes than not, they're incredibly defensive, and I have to be able to be called a race traitor, and they don't even understand what race is. It's so I have to be able to be defensive about it, and just like, a lot of times they fall into denial. As just some call me a race traitor, though, something like that. It's nothing new that's ever really invented by people who are defensive, and that for me is a challenge. And the other challenge is that you your life is going to change. You might
Mhm,
lose your friends. Were they really friends to begin with? That's only something you can decide.
mhm,
You might lose family. You might lose family. I'm talking about family deciding that you are worthless and they can't take anything you have to say, and they don't want to be with you. You it's and these are extremes, but these are things that are challenging. And
mhm,
so over the years, over the decades and stuff, it comes up. I mean, during the George Floyd era, I've been doing this for decades, but other white folks became more aware. Okay, and so that recreated the cycle of defensiveness once again. And for example, I would write a letter expressing myself of how I felt, that was very generic and meant to be in the aggregate for
mhm,
our supremacy. And I didn't put any names on it. If I had
mhm,
50,000 followers, but people come to you and tell you off. And they think the letters to them, they think the writings to them.
mhm,
And it's almost like they're outing themselves a
mhm,
little bit. And
mhm,
that was been probably the most challenging for me, is that people I thought they treated my child perfectly. They try to, all my children well and me well. But then all of a sudden, they just kind of the truth came out, I guess. And that's been challenging. But
So, are you ever challenged by Black people?
this is going to sound strange. Very rarely. I don't know if I'm just lucky. I have gotten, I don't want to go off and pontificate here, but I have had the most support and love and mentoring. And I'm going to cry. I cannot explain, Dr. Shaw, I can't explain. I mean, I started from ground zero, and I had people believe in me who, in their own best interest, had absolutely, no reason to do so.
Mm-hmm.
And very rarely do I have, maybe I'll have somebody misinterpret something. I mean, honestly, I can't even say, just, I have not had, I don't know. I've been just
I
supportive.
wouldn't think that you had, but hey, anything's possible. So I just thought I'd
Right,
ask.
right.
Yeah, I wouldn't think that you had. I mean, I know how excited I was to see some of the things that you've written. I know how great it made me feel. And I tell you, it really, not only is it impressive, but it gives, as a Black female, it feels hopeful, right? Some of the things that you've written make me, as a Black female, say there is hope, because again, I'm always amazed that we would even be having these conversations in 2025. And in 2025, the climate that we're currently living in, it almost feels like we've gone back to way, way back. Like we've fallen so far off the cliff that we can't, it's almost like we're starting over in some
It's
areas.
surreal to me. Surreal.
Yeah.
It's it's almost unbelievable.
Yeah.
How can we repeat history like this soon? Didn't we just, like,
Yeah.
mind equals blown every day? And I'm really lucky. The one thing I was born with was a lot of patience. As my one, everyone has their, like, superpower. I might not be able to add one and one. I do computers, but I'm really patient, and I'm in for the long haul, and I'm gonna stick with. I have to believe white folks can step up to the plate. And let me tell
Yeah.
you, I lose my faith in humanity every day, 10 times a day, but
Mm-hmm.
I just, I have to keep some hope, just a little bit of hope there, because I've seen miracles. I've
Mm-hmm.
worked with people in one of my groups that I used to run. Um, it was a group of just 5,000 people with 7 admins, very, very personal, multicultural, everybody from different religions, and uh, people who didn't have homes, people who were wealthy, people who were doctors, people who barely passed high school. I mean, it was just Quakers, Muslims, Jewish people, Palestinians. I mean,
Oh
we
yeah.
all got together and we learned together. And I've seen miracles over
Mm-hmm.
time.
Mm-hmm.
For example, one lady came in saying, I don't see color. And so we're like, okay, we get it. That's a
Yeah.
basic, you know, that's one of the 30 top, classic cliches and
Yeah.
aisles of
It is.
human.
Uh-huh.
So she came stuck with us for 2.5 years, and she listened and she participated. This I don't see color woman, and I was so damn proud of her. She
Mm-hmm.
she wrote me on a text, on a message, and said, Kim, I think I'm done with this group. I just cannot take these people coming in and it's driving me nuts and saying I don't see color. And I
Mm-hmm.
was like, oh my god, okay, I understand, you're ready to move on. It was a beginner. It was for what I do. And I was so happy. I almost cried because I was like, she doesn't remember. That's how I met her. That's where
Right.
she started.
That's where
And I
she
can't take them
was.
there.
Yeah.
And she told us a story of how she finally had the strength to go to her neighbor who was posting this flag, this Confederate flag, and tell her what she really thought. And I was like, oh my God, this is what I'm here
Yeah.
for. I'm like, you're ready to move on. Go out of the
One of the
group. I get it.
miracles. Yeah.
I
One of
would, so I
those
know
miracles.
it's possible. It's not easy, but it's possible. And
Yes,
so
it is.
somebody like
It
that gives me.
is. So you say, you make mistakes, but you have to just get back up and do it again. What are some of the mistakes you've made, and how did you learn from them? What did you learn from
Oh boy, some of the mistakes I've made. Well, obviously, what I discussed earlier about thinking I get this now. I get this now.
them? Yeah.
It's like, no, no, Kim, you don't, and you never are going to fully. And I learn something
Mm-hmm.
new every day. That's obviously a huge. You just have to come to terms with that. One of the mistakes I made, and this is very personal, I was working with somebody, this was very recently, maybe like 2 years ago. I was working with somebody, and this is kind of a nuance, but I blew it. I do, and I admit it, and it destroyed my relationship with a person.
Mm-hmm.
I was looking for someone who was a therapist, and this is kind of personal, and I wanted them to be somebody who understood systemic racism, at least to a certain level. They don't have to be an
Mm-hmm.
expert, but I can't have somebody who's, you know, not, if they're going to work with me, they have to understand what I do. And so there has to be some sort of equivalence and understanding.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it was really not easy to find. And I found this woman, and I had my first meeting with her, and I completely blew it because she looked white to me, and she looked as white completely. I had read her bio, and I messed on this. I completely messed up. Now I did a video on it. What happened was we were talking and doing an intake like most people do when they want to talk to a therapist. And she was talking to me, and I couldn't tell where she was coming from. And I was trying to get to know her. And I said, I read in your bio that you come from an ethnically diverse background, or multicultural background. And I was just curious if you wouldn't mind briefly just telling me a little bit about what your background is with that and how you feel about, because it was a lot of things were happening in the country that obviously.
Mm-hmm.
And and she was telling me, she started telling me, and she didn't seem like she really was that into, because not everybody who's non-white is like completely educated themselves. I
Right.
mean, in regards to our history and all that,
Mm-hmm.
it's not their fault. They just aren't. They don't have any help
Mm-hmm.
to. So
Mm-hmm.
I made a mistake. I'll say it was bluntly. I said, have you ever been able to, do you kind of pass ever as in white? And that was a really dumb thing for me to ask. And she took total offense, and she was pissed as hell.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt like a, and I had never, I made a mistake. I,
Yeah.
I insulted her. I guess that was like a really trigger point for her
Mm-hmm.
because I blew it.
Yeah. And I can see where that would be a trigger because if it's somebody that you may have thought was white, they probably have passed, but that
Yeah,
whole word
yeah.
past, that used to be a thing,
It,
right? In
right.
history, the
I
word
was like
past
golden
has been a
days.
thing.
Yeah,
Yeah. Uh-huh. So
right.
I get that.
And I don't even know if I
Um,
used the word or not, but it made her really upset. And I was like, oh my God, I'm an idiot. And so even I, somebody who's completely dedicated to trying to learn, totally blew it.
mhm,
Just totally. That was ridiculous to me. I don't know what I was thinking.
mhm. Um,
And I had to look, and I, so,
Yeah. I want to talk about some practical ways that people can show up in their everyday lives as allies for people of color. We'll talk about that after break. We're already at another break. This conversation is happening fast, but it is really good. We'll be back in a moment on Doctor2Doctor in the chat room on 94.7 FM. Thank you guys for sticking around. I am here with Kim. Hate to even try and say her last name because I haven't said it in the last few minutes, and I'm so afraid I'm gonna
Palermo,
miss. There
Palermo.
you go.
You got it. You
and
got
I am, and I am just Rhonda. Okay, I'm just Rhonda.
it. I got you.
I want to talk about some practical ways that just everyday people can show up as allies and support in their everyday lives. Talk about that.
Okay, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Being in, it doesn't have to be a grand gesture, and that's what there's no grand gestures that are necessary for every day. There's just practical things. The number one thing, it's shocking. I'm joking. It's not shocking. Listen. It's so easy. Listen to Black people when they talk.
Mm,
Listen to them. Believe them, and then repeat. Listen to them. That's the most learning. I mean, I could read every book. I could even have experience. The most incredible gift I've ever received was from all the people being open and comfortable enough to tell Black folks and brown folks and indigenous folks and to talk to me and tell me what they've experienced. And
mm-hmm.
They don't know each other. They're all over the country and the world, and they're telling me the same thing. And they're telling me, and I'm listening to them, and I believe every word they say. I don't ask what happened before the camera started rolling.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, it sounds so simple.
Mm-hmm.
Listen and believe them. That's, there's other things. Learn a real racial history. Don't be afraid. You didn't do it. You
Right.
about everything else. Why would you not want to learn about
Mm-hmm.
our real racial history?
Mm-hmm.
Living a lie is no way to go through life. And do the internal work.
Mm-hmm.
Drop
So
your ego.
here's a real one. How can allies support people of color in the workplace and other professional settings? Because that's a thing.
It's huge.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about just being friendly, and that's kind of a misunderstanding a little
Mm-hmm.
bit. It's about
Mm-hmm.
actively challenging inequities and
Mm-hmm.
using your white privilege to create change, not the change you want. They're leading,
Mm-hmm.
you're supporting, and it's a slippery slope. You don't take over. You don't do things that you think's right and get in front of them no, 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 no. I mean, you can't do it. So it's definitely an art, than more of an art than a science. But you find out how you can support them, and you do it. It's
Mm-hmm.
not about us. Listening,
Mm-hmm.
validating experiences, speaking up the truth. Yes, I saw that and I heard that, and it was, um, advocating for equity.
Mm-hmm.
There's so much. The whole pushback with DEI is beyond my human understanding. Um,
Mm-hmm.
be an advocate for non-performative, meaningful DEI. It not only is amazing, the best thing for a company, if you actually want to be profitable, which most companies, that's their goal, but it is incredible for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
DEI to me stands for basically being a decent human to the fellow humans that you love. It's
Yeah.
nothing more than that. Being willing to,
Mm-hmm.
um, being willing to care. It DEI is so important. And another thing, and this might sound kind of strange, normalize talking about racism. Normalize
Yeah.
it. Talk about racism. That's the one thing I try to teach the folks eventually, like over time.
Mm-hmm.
Your voice. Learn to talk about it because you will survive through it. You will survive.
Mm-hmm.
Black, brown, indigenous people, people of color, uh, people of mixed heritage might not, because
Mm-hmm.
racism kills or maims,
Oh, wow.
destroys lives.
Mm-hmm.
And our feelings can never be up here
Mm-hmm.
for the lives of our fellow humans. I mean, come on. We'll live. Okay, we'll get our feelings hurt, which
Mm-hmm.
is shared. I mean, I was devastated at my experience. I felt like a moron, but I lived through it. And
Mm-hmm.
some Black people won't. And
Wow.
that's not right. So
So we know that there's a role in terms of allyship and how a role that it plays in dismantling systemic racism.
mm,
Um, but when I listen to you, I feel like allyship or advocacy or whatever you want to call it, I feel like there are categories or different departments. Like, you got this department over here that's working on or that could be working towards what's happening in the workplace. You got this area over here that could be working towards what's happening with people of color and law enforcement. You got this other that could be working on, it just seems like, I guess I'm saying it seems so much bigger than what just this conversation made me feel this way.
yeah.
That it seems so much bigger than I had imagined. I just, on the surface, we want to say, like, stop being stop being racist. We want people to stop being racist, but it falls under so many different
Yeah.
things or categories, right? That you almost have to, like I said, just pull back the layers in so many ways. And like once you get it as it relates to one thing, then maybe you need to learn about it as it relates to this,
Yep.
or
Yep.
as it
It'll
relates to
mother.
that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Because I know for me, and something that I shared with somebody in the workplace, somebody that I reported to at the time, and I said to them, you know, you should probably go and take some courses like in DEI, or we had this conversation, and I said, because you should learn what it try to get a feel of what it's like not to necessarily show up as your authentic self.
Hmm.
Learn what it's like to be the only person in the room, and maybe not have, you can be fully qualified and all of that, educated, but not necessarily have your voice considered
Hmm.
as a result of your the hue of your skin, you
Hmm.
know, which is ridiculous, you
Yeah,
know.
vicarious learning is so important for us. I've been in some experiential learning that has just blown me over, and
Yeah.
so important. It's the closest we'll ever really come. It's important.
Hmm.
There are activities. I've run a workshop that's experiential, and it can be powerful, and uh, more than words. More than words. Just live it for just 1 second, just a little teeny second, and all of a
Yeah.
sudden you're like, whoa.
Yeah. I saw this video of these two guys doing an experiment, a white guy and a black guy, and they were both pretending to be blind. And they had on dark glasses, and they had the little cane that the
Oh, I know what
blind,
you're talking about. Yes, yes,
you
yes.
know what? Yeah.
Totally.
And so for the audience, to give the audience some context, so this white man and this black man are both pretending to be blind, and they're just walking on the streets, and they run up and they grab somebody's arm.
For help.
And every time the white man grabbed somebody's arm, it startled them, but when they turned to look and saw him, they allowed the man to continue to hold their arm and tried to guide him wherever he was going. When the black man would do that, they would turn around and pull away from him and did not try and help him. What I found interesting is that, like, I always go to the comments, right?
Of course.
And what I found interesting is that most people saw it as racism, right? And discriminatory. But there were some people that were saying, well, it's probably because the black guy ran up so fast behind, and it startled them or whatever. They just didn't want to see it
Right, right,
for
right.
what it was.
Handle facing like it is what it is, and
Yeah.
don't try to make excuses. It's like an apology.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
We do try to we have this tendency. We want to believe what we believe, and
Yeah.
psychologically speaking, that's like yes, we make excuses when things are obviously not.
Hmm.
I've seen a few of those experiences, and they're very powerful. Even just watching, like
Hmm.
even just watching. But yeah, the
So we
denial.
know that like you said, they did away with DEI, and we know that a lot of businesses have publicly done away with DEI. How can businesses and organizations foster a culture for allyship? Um, you know, what are some of the things that organizations can easily do where, even for the toughest people that are, I think in your when I introduced you, you call them the newest learners,
Yep, the
you
new
know,
resistant.
uh-huh,
Right.
the resistance, yeah, may be able to process, and stomach, because, what are some things that organizations can do?
Well, first of all, at the very, very top of organizations, and this is my personal opinion, actually. This is
Hmm.
me. This is from Kim. There, it's imperative that they embed real, non-performative policies for DEI that help educate everybody. Not
Mm-hmm.
blame, not
Mm-hmm.
point fingers, but make equity a core value, not just something they say in their statement, but actually live it and bring it right out in the open and just live it. Um, Again, I say this over and over again. It is a lifestyle. And even for a corporation, now that corporations are supposed to be humans and have personhood, be a good person, be a decent person. You know what a decent person is. And that's
Mm-hmm.
being good to everybody and not assuming your experience is universal, because a lot of times that's what we do. And embedding diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging into everything they do, providing real education. Um, so people can learn and grow. And isn't that what you want of your employees? You want them to
Mm-hmm.
you don't want them to be, you know, just sitting there never learning about anything but just the work. You want them to grow as a human and
Mm.
be able to give more to the corporation. And every study shows that it benefits everybody. Um, Holding leadership accountable is the number one, and making sure if they get it, some things do trickle down. How about that?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
that is if the leader demands that this is how we're running a business with integrity, then people will follow suit.
Kim,
So,
do you know of any organizations that have done that well?
you know,
Not that I want you to call out any names or anything, but do you happen to know of
yes, and
some organizations?
I won't mention names, but
Hmm.
I have been blown away. And the reason I'm not going to mention names is because a lot of people,
Sure,
what's true and what's on social media can be quite the opposite.
sure.
I have seen a huge company that I don't know how they do it because I'm not in the company and I don't
Hmm.
work for the company.
Hmm.
They have made all their top leaders
Hmm.
be educated in the most incredible way. And
Hmm.
it's truly beautiful when I hear the conversations. So much
Hmm.
it's you can tell every single person just gets it.
Hmm.
They don't get it obviously to the point of where people who have to live it, but they are living, breathing proof it can be done, and it makes for such a beautiful, inclusive
Mm.
environment where people want to stay.
Yeah.
They like it there, and not just
Hmm.
people want to stay, and not just white men or white women, but everybody wants to stay
Hmm.
because
Hmm.
they feel heard, they feel seen, they feel listened to, and they feel like they matter. And
Hmm.
yes, I have seen it, but few and far between. So
Hmm. Hmm.
I guess
How do
that's that.
you how do you think allies can amplify the voices of people of color without speaking over them?
By doing what I'm probably not good at doing right now is listening to them. And I'm blabbing a lot now, but listening to people when they talk,
Hmm.
understanding before responding, um,
Mm.
giving credit, giving credit. And
Hmm.
one thing I love doing is when a person comes to me, and when I had a huge audience a few years back, when people come to me and they show me their business, and it's a black owned business and it's a black run business, and they're so proud and they're excited, I want to do an interview with them. I want to show. And so, because I want to use my privilege of having all these people follow me,
Hmm.
so that I can say, look at this, look at they've done,
Yeah.
go to
Yeah.
them. And like they're doing amazing. I want to we got to use our privilege to give credit and amplify and direct attention to the incredible people that are out there, who are by way of our system purposefully not.
Using your privilege. I love that.
That's it. Use your privilege to do great things, and you'll feel so good about yourself.
Hmm.
That's
What gives you hope for the future, Kim, in terms of racial equity and allyship?
um, what gives me hope for the future. And this is going to sound maybe not answering the question, but I'm just going to say it.
Hmm.
What gives me the most hope for the future are two things. And the first one is that I have witnessed Black, brown, African American, Indigenous people, people who are identified as like non-white,
Mm-hmm.
Asian, after all they've been through and the history and the
Mm-hmm.
racism and the personal racism and the what's happened with their families, and they have shown me the most humility, forgiveness, not for me personally, but just willingness to
Mm-hmm.
to just take me in their arms and help me. And they're living this every day. Yet
Mm-hmm.
they, despite all the history and the harm and betrayal, they've been patient and guiding me, and the generosity, I don't even know what to say. And that gives me so much hope.
Yeah. I've got two quick questions, and we're about out of time. But how can or what advice would you give to someone that wants to be an ally but doesn't know where to start?
I would say the first thing, like I keep saying and I'm repeating the same thing, is listen to Black people talk and learn.
Mm-hmm.
Listen to them and believe them and
Mm-hmm.
learn our real racial history. All of it
Mm-hmm.
in detail, not the surface
Mm-hmm.
stuff. I'm talking that this is where details matter.
Mm-hmm.
Number two, drop your ego.
Mm.
We've got to drop our ego. We've got to do it. Do what it takes. And the third thing is remember, we're going to mess up. We're going to feel stupid. We're going to
Mm-hmm.
feel like horrible about ourselves, and we're going to want to run away.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to feel like an idiot.
Mm-hmm.
Keep going anyway. Keep,
Yeah.
keep experiencing, keep driving. Forgive yourself somehow. Do what it takes, because it is a gift you give yourself as a white person to close that cognitive dissonance gap of liberty and justice for all and
Yeah.
a more perfect union, when, wait a second, I'm living life here and I don't see that happening for everybody. And
Mm-hmm.
it's disturbing. And when you close that gap, it helps us. It's like selfish almost. People say, who do
Mm-hmm.
you do this for? I do it for me because I can't
Yeah.
stand just watching. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah. About 60 seconds. Any final thoughts that you want to share?
Actually, you've covered this so well with the questions that you've asked. I
Thank
am
you.
thrilled to be here. I cannot thank you enough for allowing me to come on and talk about what I do as a specialty. I do not teach Black folks. I do not teach
Mhm.
African American folks. I do not teach, uh, you know, uh, people in historically marginalized groups. They teach me.
Mm.
Okay, they teach me, and then
Yeah.
I educate other folks that look like me and are like me to understand and to find a voice and to find their way.
Yeah.
So
Well, we need more like you. We need more Kims. I am so grateful to have connected with you. I appreciate the work that you do, and I really mean that. And I know that our listening audience will appreciate this as well. Thank you so much. Love to have you back again.
thank you.
Love to have you guys back again. Thank you so much for coming back every Saturday to hang out with me, inviting you to come back next Saturday, same chat channel, same chat time, right here on WOJG.com on 94.7 FM. We will see you then.